Okay, it's Wednesday, February 27th. This is ARB work session. Let's call it to order, please.
Corral. Cabrera-Wosick.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Cavazos.
Here.
Larson.
Here. Okay, I guess we'll start with the first item. We seem to have an agenda here. We'll push that out, not the agenda, but the minutes for approval of the January meeting. We'll push that out. Nice and long.
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed them in terms of my specific commentary, and I talked with the clerk the secretary this afternoon, and just asked, there was 2 points I had asked her just to review the minutes for, or review the video for, 2 points. So I was going to suggest that with the adoption of the minutes, to ask her to verify that, if that's indeed a correct accounting, to have it included in the minutes. If not, then approve them without it. Does that make sense? So I can make a motion to approve.
How about if we motion for this to be cleaned up and readdressed at the next meeting?
Okay,
That would probably be better.
We're trying to get it, because the council's adopting their minutes next week. Is there an urgency to have these approved?
So the urgency to have these approved would be so that the council can rely on them in their action in approving their minutes where they upheld you on all of these matters with one small variation. And so, but I don't know if Emily's told you, but she's sending out a letter to the applicant with all the information about what your motions were and what the council's motions were. So that's going to be really what the applicant's relying on. They asked for that, and so we're providing that to them. So if you want to, at this point, if the applicant decides to appeal it to circuit court, that would still allow you time to fix your minutes and have them correctly reflect the videotape if you wanted to put this off. That was a long answer for a short question. I'm sorry.
Well, let me explain what I'm asking for. So I made 2 statements in my testimony that I recall making. One was about when I spoke with the applicant, the applicant's representative, and I said I was disclosed that I was going to make that, I was going to describe that conversation I had with them at the meeting. Mm-hmm. And I asked Shelley to review that to see, was that statement in fact made as part of the initial presentation. And then also I recall asking Mr. Prater, the applicant, saying, did you do a financial assessment of the redevelopment of the property with the structures? And he said no. And I felt that that was an important accounting for in the minutes.
Yeah.
So I had asked Shelley, there wasn't time. I showed up at 5:45 asking to review that. There wasn't time to go through the record. So I was going to ask if she could verify whether or not those statements were a part of the video and incorporate them. If they're not, then not include it and still adopt the minutes.
You could do either motion then.
Okay.
Okay. How do the other board members feel about approving something under a conditional?
I mean, I'm fine with that if we can't table it. I mean, I'm comfortable tabling it unless it's going to cause a problem, but.
Well, I just didn't know if anybody would have any type of uneasy feeling approving something that they didn't have a chance to actually read. And so that's why I was going to table it. Would like to get
Why
your
don't we
guys'
just
opinion
table
on
it then?
I will table it.
You table it?
Okay.
Okay.
Want to make a motion then?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I want to say she did a great job with the minutes. It's a lot to go through. So thank you, Shelley, for putting the time and effort into that. I move that the Architectural Review Board defer adoption of the January 16th, 2019 meeting minutes to the regularly scheduled March meeting, to have the clerk verify whether or not the discussion included a statement regarding me stating that I would disclose my conversations with the applicant's representatives at last meeting, and also to confirm whether or not I made a statement asking Mr. Prater, the applicant's representative, asking whether or not they had done a financial statement, in that answer in the minutes.
I second the motion.
Okay, I got a motion and second. Any last minute discussions? Okay, let's put it for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we can move forward. Now, is the agenda correct on making this meeting more time efficient, to use Martin's expertise, or do we need to adjust the agenda?
No, it should
Are you,
be fine.
okay, so you're here for the guideline discussion?
And the bylaws.
And the bylaws, okay. Then we'll go ahead with the agenda items. First thing on the list is draft historic guideline discussions.
So in your packet tonight, you have your guidelines that are redline marked up here. And Martin, if you will you take a moment to explain some of the edits you proposed in this redline version? And then I also want to touch on the small cell facilities that we had talked about, as well as potentially adding some verbiage on solar panels. It is an application that's going to be coming up, and I think we might see more throughout the town as the years go on. And then also, I would like us to discuss the language for how we want to list out our historic structures in that table within the guidelines.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Let me give you a high-level view of what I was trying to accomplish with the edits that I proposed. There were certain things in here that need to be in the ordinances, such as if a certificate of appropriateness is only valid for 1 year and then expires, that's really more of an ordinance thing rather than should be adopted the guidelines, because the guidelines are just what they say. They're not law. They're just an opportunity for the ARB to say, in general, this is the sort of thing we will support, and these are the sorts of things that we will oppose. And it is an opportunity for you to declare in advance what those principles are that you're going to be deciding cases on, so that you can be consistent and everybody who comes in as an applicant can read these and say, this is what I'm expecting to get approved, or I may ask you for a departure from this, and I understand that it's a departure because you've published this. So it's a benefit to the public, it's a benefit to the ARB, it's a benefit to the council then to know that you've adopted these guidelines as a level of consistency for how you're going to be making decisions. So that's what the purpose of the guidelines is, and if the council adopts them as guidelines, then the council is endorsing your idea, your vision of what the town historic district will look like, and will be saying, we've got your back. The council has got the ARB's back. And so that's the general idea here is to keep things that need to be in the ordinance, have things in the guidelines that need to be there, and then if there are other things that need to be adopted, like a color palette, those can be adopted from time to time, because color palettes, change over time. If you adopt a particular company's color palette, that's going to stop being manufactured at some point in the future. They go out of style, or whatever it is, the big paint companies just stop making them. So certain things like paint palettes should just be adopted from time to time, so that people know that if they go and buy this particular paint, they can use that. And this is kind of a general principle, but it's specific to the paint, is you don't have to propose that paint if you're an applicant. You can come in and say, I want to use a different paint besides the color palette that you've proposed, but I've documented here that this is the color palette used in the period of time that I'm trying to replicate here in this building, and that's, so I'm asking you to approve it on that basis. So it gives a principled basis for approvals. One of the things that I've seen, and that brings me to another point, one of the things that I've seen in other Architectural Review Board guidelines is adopting a period of interest, so that you know when your historic period is, and you want the buildings that are being recreated, or that are being created in the historic district, to kind of match that idea. Give you an example, the building I work in at 9200 Church Street in Manassas was built in the 90s, but it has a number of features that are similar to other Old Town Manassas buildings. It's got brick facades, it's got little concrete lintels, it's got the corner where the two streets meet cut on the building, so it's kind of got this trapezoidal look. I guess it's a trapezoid. Don't ask me what the geometry is my worst subject. But it's just got a number of features that make it look older than it actually is, and people actually think that it's been around for a lot longer than it has. So the idea there is you're creating an opportunity for people to have a look in the area. One of the key distinctions that I run into again and again is between historic preservation and historic appearance. Historic preservation, if you've got an actual historic building, if you've got George Washington's house, you want to actually keep the wood siding that was there, and the layers of paint have actual historic value to them. Other buildings, you don't need to have that level of historic preservation. You might want to have an opportunity for people to upgrade the windows and bring in a vinyl window. And the big issue with vinyl windows is, what do they look like? Do the muntins look right, and so on? Do they have the correct look? So there's a big difference between historic preservation and historic design. So let me get into a couple of other things here. You'll notice a big area that's cut on packet pages 16, 17, and 18, where you had reproduced or summarized the comprehensive plan and community design. I felt that was redundant, and we had already references in here to the comprehensive plan. So if something's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, that's a valid basis for denial of a certificate of appropriateness, but it doesn't need to be reproduced in here, because for one thing, the comp plan changes, and you don't want to have to change this every time the comp plan changes. And for another thing, if you're summarizing it, then people are going to say, well, is this summary what's controlling, or is what's actually in the comp plan controlling? So you don't want to have any daylight between those two documents. And Emily touched on the 5G small cell facilities. That's on packet page 21 near the top. I had a bullet point there for language to be drafted, because there's a Federal Communications Commission order that came out last year that requires that if you are going to regulate small cell facilities under your historic guidelines, that they meet certain criteria. They can't be too onerous in terms of cost to the developer, to the facility provider. They can't be discriminatory. You have to treat people similarly. You have to treat 5G similarly to other similar facilities that are in the public rights of way. And then they have to be objective. And the standard for objective is laid out in the FCC guideline order. And those will need to be drafted. I have looked in vain for anything that I really like. I did find one from New England, city of Pittstown, I think is the name of the place, that I provided to Emily, that, or if I haven't, I will, that has some general guidelines about 5G facilities. But here's the reason why there's a specific concern with 5G facilities. Unlike the 4G facilities where you're putting up a tower in a church or a church steeple, or you're having a disguised tree or something like that, every mile or two, these are going to be 10 times as many in the same area. They're going to be a lot of these things because they have very short range. They're carrying a lot of data, and because people are using their phones driving down the street getting data, you need to have a lot of them in order to serve the people that are needing the data. And so you will have these barrels that look like a transformer on a lot of light poles, and they have to be in very specific locations. They have to be at a specific height, and they have to be very specifically located. When I've talked to companies that go around to place these things, they're telling me, well, it has to be between 18 and 28 feet. and it has to be above the ground, and it has to be at this particular corner, and it has to be, not just on any of the four corners, but this one over here, the southeast corner, on this pole that you've got there. And so, they're very specific about their locations, and so we want to be really careful about the appearance of these things, because if they start popping up all over the place, it's really going to be detrimental to the look of the town, potentially. So that's one thing I wanted to call specific attention to, and happy to answer any questions that you have about any of the specifics in here.
You mind if we do that kind of for efficiency's sake?
Let's do that.
Okay, so one of the questions I had on, you and I talked about earlier, on page 5, certificates of appropriateness.
Page 5 of the
I'm sorry,
the
page,
guidelines?
packet 15.
Got it.
So I would agree with you that if we're replicating ordinance standards under certificate of appropriateness, we talk about the board shall announce its decision within 14 days after the conclusion of the final hearing. Does it make sense just to go ahead and strike that and keep the timelines within the ordinance and simply just say that the ordinance establishes the timelines for which to approve?
Yeah, that's entirely up to you all.
Okay.
That's an appropriate thing to keep in the ordinance.
The earlier strike you had earlier in the page, just for redundancy, we talk later on about the relevance of the plan, so the ARB is guided by the Code of Haymarket. That's, I assume that was just for repetitive.
Yeah.
We say that multiple times, so, okay.
Right, so, yeah, that kind of bold italic language there near the top of packet page 15, yeah, I just thought that it didn't need to be in that section for one thing.
Gotcha. And then the other strike-throughs under certificate of appropriateness, those are just, again, repetitive of the ordinance appeals, okay. The exemptions also established, we gave Emily some discretion over, was it decks, fences?
Decks and patios in the back that are not viewed from the public street.
Okay.
I think maybe if the board is amenable to it, we look at doing fences that are already approved styles in our guidelines and have HOA approval already.
So that would need to be in the ordinance.
Okay.
Okay.
Because otherwise, if the ordinance says that the ARB has to review these things, and then the ARB adopts a guideline that's contradictory to that, then the ordinance is going to control, because it's a higher document. So it needs to be in the ordinance that the ARB may, by adopted resolution, allow the zoning administrator to rule on these things. And I'd have to look at the statute again. I think there's some provisions in there, maybe, that, just to make sure that we're consistent with state law.
I think the ordinance already does give her discretion on, from public right-of-way, we can't do interior, but it sounds like beefing that up,
Right.
making that more substantive.
Right, well, if it's interior and it's not observable from the exterior, from the public right-of-way, then it's not subject to historic guidelines in any way.
Okay. Which I think is generally what we're getting at, but we had set a precedent of reviewing everything.
Right.
On the comprehensive plan, Martin and I talked about earlier about, and I agree with Emily as well, is that, repeating what's in the plan. I think this language is still important because it does say, for different areas of the town, we have different expectations in terms of compatible architecture. So I'm comfortable still referring to, later on, the design guidelines back to the plan, but this is good information to have. I looked at Culpepper's plans, which you had worked on as well, correct, Martin?
Correct.
Which talks about the period of interest, where I almost recommend we kind of plagiarize a lot of their characterizations of each period of time,
We call it
research. But I think we have the opportunity, so in the Culpeper one, it actually took examples in town of each of the styles of architecture. So it might take a little bit of work, but that might be something we can do as an addendum that says, here's the periods of interest in town, and here's some examples of them. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
So we'll leave this in here then as your recommendation, the community design and comprehensive plan.
No, I agree with Martin that, and Emily, that gets struck, but we're
I
still.
would keep it, just in case someone doesn't go back to read that. If somebody was just going through our ARB guidelines,
Do we, so later on, Emily, what do you think? So later on, we refer to the comp plan. So maybe do we just make a general statement to say that,
I was gonna say, maybe we make a community design section where we use the examples that we would do through towns, like Town of Culpeper examples in this area of interest aligns with our comprehensive plan, here's where it can, it then can move you back to that.
I agree. I think here is if the comp plan changes, that was Martin's earlier point, if we change the comp plan, which we're getting ready to do, then we now have contradictory provisions,
Okay.
so.
Is the historic walking central portion of town, is that also in the comp plan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, Emily, yes.
I just want to make sure, because I feel like that section is really important too for
We'll have it.
people to understand.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
will the ARB get an opportunity to review the comp plan?
Yes, that's actually what I was just gonna say. What we're gonna do is planning commission's working on their portion, but I wanna bring the ARB in to help with the historic section of the comp plan, and then making sure that, for instance, if we use photos, here's, a general vision of what we expect in this area of town, that we reflect that where appropriate in the comp plan.
Okay.
And will this be through Google Docs, or are we going, is that our process we're going to use, or?
Yes, so after this meeting, Marshall and I were talking about this earlier, I'm gonna take this document and upload it to Google Docs, accept the changes that we agree on tonight, and then I'll let everybody kind of sleep on it, think about it some more, and we come back to it. And then I'll do the same thing with the comprehensive plan once the planning commission has a first draft ready for you guys to work on the historic section.
Yeah, and this will all be reviewable by the public, so that.
Yes, so anytime if the public were wanting to access that Google Doc, we'll have a section on our website that they can contact me. I'll send them the link and they can view it publicly. They won't be able to make edits, but they can view it. Or I'll print a copy at that date and time that they request it for them.
So Martin, going on to packet page 18, and Emily as well, the enhancement project, I guess since that doesn't no longer make sense to have in there.
Right.
Okay, and then the street,
Also, some parts of that were dealing with what the town was doing in its own right-of-way, which, the brick sidewalks and so on, that was not something that developers were being required to do, as far as I know.
on B,
Under A, the first bullet point,
okay,
Roman 2A, first bullet point, it was talking about pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle access to the
Oh, okay, I
town.
gotcha.
And then the second bullet point was brick sidewalks, which requires a VDOT agreement that has to be between the town and VDOT and not the developer in any case. So most of that was dealing with what the town itself was doing, which might be of interest, but it's already been done at this point.
I got you. So Emily, the backstop for us, valid for us requiring bricks along the fairgrounds, that came out of the zoning ordinance? Okay,
Correct.
okay.
That's listed in our zoning ordinance under the use and design standards for infrastructure.
So we don't have it captured, not having it captured here, we have it captured in the
It's
zone?
captured.
Okay. Are we running into any problems in fences and walls?
The only thing I was maybe going to ask to consider, and it would be more along the lines of an ordinance amendment to go with the brick sidewalk, is to put, if a retaining wall were to be put in, similar like the Chick-fil-A one, maybe we request or require that certain type of veneer on it, but that would be more of an ordinance use and design standard.
I saw we struck the alternating board on board provision. That was, I'm sorry, Martin, I cut you off. You're about to say.
Oh, that's fine. Forgot what I was going to say anyway.
Can you explain why you crossed off the section under roofing about the tin roofs?
What page?
Page 23.
So this is a vested rights issue, and vested rights are governed by statute and case law. So to have a separate vested rights standard, it would have to be adopted by an ordinance rather than being in the guidelines in order to be effective. As this is saying for pressed tin or standing seam roof styles that be preserved and refurbished unless the cost of such preservation exceeds 25% of the assessed value of the structure. So there are a couple of concerns with that. Besides the vested rights issue, there's also the question of, when does somebody decide what refurbishing is necessary, and what would be, how do you calculate 25% of the assessed value of the structure? 25, so that could be the tax assessment, I suppose, and by using the word assessed, that's implied, but it doesn't say tax assessed. Then, if you were going to put this in an ordinance, you would also want to make sure that you were not creating a perverse incentive to let the roof deteriorate. Because if I wait long enough and the cost to repair it is more than 25% of the value of my house, well, I don't have to preserve it anymore. So you don't want to create that kind of perverse incentive.
So is there still a way, I guess to Bon's point, is there still a way for us to, if we're looking at the architectural or period of interest or we have an existing contributing structure and it has that tin roof, and the intent is to keep that as an architectural feature, do we still have standing to do that?
Yeah, so if somebody wanted to replace a tin roof with a different style of roof that did not match, then you would be able to deny that certificate of appropriateness because it's not appropriate for that style. You want to preserve the appearance. Now, maybe they could put something besides tin that has a longer life, but it would have to look like it was a tin roof because you want to be replacing it without changing the appearance of the building.
So my point being, I think Bond, we get to the same, if the idea is to still to make that an element of the town, we still have standing to do that.
Right.
This is just the wrong tool, I guess, what you're saying to do it.
Right, this isn't the
Okay.
place to do that.
The earlier one, just for background, under chimneys, the applications require additional approval by the commission and the council. There was a time when, there's a time when there wasn't a planner in town. In the planning commission, the council were basically the de facto zoning administrator. And so
Not
this
just de
was
facto, it was de jure.
de jure, so there was a time when that happened. So that's when I read that being struck, it was just getting rid of an old practice.
Correct. Well, yeah, the town council was in fact the zoning administrator until Marchant was appointed in that capacity. And then I'm not sure why this would require additional approval from the planning commission unless there was a site plan
That's what I
requirement.
think of now,
So,
yeah.
which, you can't possibly point people in all the different directions that they need to be pointed in order to do a housing project. They really, need to study this issue and not try to do it on the fly. People need to understand that it's a very complicated process, and the ARB process is one more level of it. And you mentioned contributing structures. That's another thing that I meant to say in my opening statement, which is that you have a rule that says anything over 50 years is a historic structure, but then you have a list of specific historic structures in Appendix D on packet page 37, which I can't understand when you've got really two definitions of the same thing, and they don't match. So what I was suggesting is that you have a concept that I've seen done elsewhere, including the city of Manassas, where you have historic landmarks, and you have contributing structures, which would be anything over 50 years old, and then you have non-contributing structures. So you have three levels. You have the non-contributing structure. The major difference between that and a contributing structure is that you can demolish a non-contributing structure without a certificate of appropriateness. So 49 years old and 11 months doesn't come to the ARB. 50 years and a day, it comes to the ARB for a certificate of appropriateness before you can demolish it. That's the main difference. Now, if you demolish the 49 year and 11 month building in the historic district, and you want to build something else there, you're still going to have to come for the certificate of appropriateness to rebuild that or to build something new there. But this idea of landmarks as the most protected, contributing structures as the next most protected, and then the lowest level being non-contributing structures. Under that three-part system, Appendix D would then become your landmarks. So they have the highest level of protection because these are the ones that we have some history on. They have names. They're, clearly a lot older than just 50 years. Now, that's also going to have to be updated based on which ones of these have already been demolished, unfortunately.
And I was reading from the comp plan, so the following structure says, it has the 50-year-old, this is from the comp plan, it says 50 years or older are designated historic buildings. The following structures are designated historic and worthy of preservation, so that's the landmark thing, I guess, what you're.
Right.
Okay. So I guess, to your point, we don't really define non-contributing resources anywhere in the document, so it sounds like your suggestion is we do the tier.
I
Okay.
definitely think we should, because soon enough, the Longstreet Commons neighborhood, they'll get there. They'll be 50 years old. Are they,
That's where I live.
are they historic? So I think we need to go ahead and define it while some of these neighborhoods are going to start aging into it in the next decade or so. Sorry.
No, I was supposed to live there 5 years. I've been there almost 20. I'm becoming historic. So.
Martin, is this the appropriate place if we have a historic landmark table? I know you mentioned we'll need to update it because some have been demolished. Could we have a separate kind of subsection of the demolished structures, or would that be more appropriate in the comprehensive plan?
Well, I think you could do a couple of things with that. One would be to put it in an appendix that indicates that these buildings were demolished and they are guides for what we would like to see elsewhere in the town. And you could also have them retain them here and just note that they've been demolished, that they were landmarks at one time.
Okay.
The other thing that you could do with the landmark list to strengthen that a little bit would be put that in the ordinance. So that way you've got the council saying these are in fact historic landmarks that we want to have adopted as for the highest level of protection in the town. That would give them a little bit more oomph, it seems like to me. That's what Manassas did, is they actually have a list that's in the ordinance and not in the guidelines.
Emily had a good idea about starting to just promote them. We seem to hide them rather than come out and just start promoting them.
Yeah.
Really, so the town starts taking ownership of them. So I like that idea.
Just join us June 7th for a historic walk.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you're going to have a list of things for a recommended zoning text amendment from the council and planning commission. So I'm assuming you're tracking all that, Emily.
Yes.
I guess for signage, was there any?
Can we, as a group, work on some verbiage for adding something along the lines of franchise logos and/or signs? We've kind of set a precedence with a couple of our recent applications that we will work with them to have the colors of their franchise logo kind of recolored, and then they can put the sign up. But I think that would help as some of these franchises start coming into town, that they clearly know we'll work with them and they can use them. For instance, A Dog's Day Out, Chick-fil-A, School of Rock. Chick-fil-A is always red. That kind of goes with ours. But School of Rock, I know, had to do a lot of changes there, but we were still able to incorporate some of their logo.
Do we speak to the area? Do we speak to the building type? I mean, is there?
It might fall under the areas of interest. So on the outer side, that's the, planned interchange park in the comp plan, that may be a more appropriate area, and therefore we kind of speak to it in the area. Whereas in the town center core, where there might be more historic landmarks, it's not the appropriate area. Maybe we say on a historic landmark building, it is not appropriate. Elsewhere, it is appropriate.
I would say something along the lines that it's on a case-by-case basis,
Okay.
because, there might be certain structures that it would be fine if they used it, so I wouldn't want to put it like black and white that it couldn't be on a building.
So it's like setting the expectation that we will entertain those, rather now we're kind of silent, saying,
Right.
yeah, okay.
So a lot of the questions I get when somebody comes to do a sign application is, I didn't see anywhere in your guidelines that I can use my franchise logo. Am I allowed to use it? And then their next question is, can I use my franchise colors? And I typically steer them towards our historic color palette
Yeah.
and say, if it's not in there, it'll be up to the discretion of the board at the meeting.
Right, I mean, you do want to give the signs are important for a number of reasons. Obviously, you want the business to be successful. It's also a safety issue, you know. If somebody's looking for something and they're driving along and looking for the sign, you want them to be able to see it so that they can get off the highway and don't have to, you know, do dangerous maneuvers to find their location. So they're very good reasons to allow the signs, particularly, you know, illumination and size, so that those are issues that you have a little bit of give on, because you're trying, you know, it might make a difference whether you're on a busy street or a less busy street, whether you allow the sign. On a busy street, it's going to need to have a more eye-catching sign.
So like, I would like prefer not having the logo necessarily like on a,
A marquee.
Like a
or-
yeah,
monument sign.
but I might think it's okay or appropriate on the building. You know what I mean? So I think it's a case-by-case basis, and then in some instances, it might be good to have it on wayfinding, but not on the building. So I think it's something we have to just kind of take as they come.
Well, that's a good point. You can, you know, head off some of those issues by having your own signage that you've put up in the public right-of-way that helps people find where the heck they're going. You know, because I'll tell you, Google Maps has changed my life, but it's not very good for the last 100 yards.
So, does that help?
Yeah, I will work on some verbiage
Okay.
for our next draft.
I think if we have general criteria that the guidelines set out, that would be better than saying just on a case-by-case basis, because then it allows people to come in and say, well, I meet this criterion of safety, I meet this criterion of visibility, I need to have this sign in order for my business to be profitable, I need to have this sign because I'm a franchise and the franchise agreement requires it. Those are all things that if you lay out in the guidelines as things that you will look at as considerations, then they at least know what to argue to you.
Martin, on 25, you had two, is it JK3, JK4? This is a problem with windows,
Oh,
and this is a mandatory advisory.
okay, yes, so Roman 4A, D, or, I don't know, yeah, I guess that D is under the A, is original siding materials shall be repaired and retained rather than removed or recovered. If replacement must be made as approved by ARB, it must be with like materials. So that comes back to the vinyl window issue I mentioned earlier, which is that you have a difference between historic preservation and a historic look. If you have a landmark, you can require like materials, because it actually makes a difference if you go up and knock on the door that it sounds like it's a wooden door rather than it being something that's, you know, a modern material. But if you have just a contributing structure, and you know you have a question about what does the window look like, and I just had this argument in Culpeper. We just had a council committee meeting on Tuesday morning of talking about these windows and what do they look like. And how historic are they? And they had the chairman of the ARB in town Culpeper come and talk about, you know, how do you know what these historic windows look like? And, you know, from the street to the average person driving by at 30 miles an hour, you can't tell the difference. But it does make a difference to people who know what the windows are supposed to look like. So you have to have some kind of idea about what kinds of windows will be approved. So, but again, if you're not talking about a historic landmark, you're not actually talking about historic preservation per se. You're really talking about the historic look of the historic district. And so that's why I recommend that you strike particularly the must be with like materials for replacement, because what this does is create a perverse incentive not to repair old buildings. Because if you have to replace a wood window with another wood window, it not only costs more, it doesn't last as long as a perfectly fine-looking vinyl window that, you know, because there's some really nice-looking vinyl windows.
Is it, we're saying like appearance or like?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking out here,
Historic appearance.
so out here, when we fixed the post office, we replaced it with one in the windows, but it wasn't, I mean, the outside of that whole entire structure is new. But we tried to recreate that.
Yeah, that's the idea.
The St. Paul's Church, when they replaced the gables on the, were you here for that when we replaced this? In the clock tower, or in the bell tower, they had the slats, and they were wood, and they were falling apart, and they wanted to replace them with a more durable material. And it gave the same effect, but it had a much durable material, so I would agree that if we're trying to recreate the appearance, that's more of what we're trying to accomplish than, you know, if we were a National Register, you have to keep your National Register, you have to provide like kind, and everything else like that, but I don't think that's what we're trying to achieve. And then the next one about paint.
Oh, yeah, so Appendix E for painting instructions. There's a detailed list of painting instructions, and I just wanted to know if that was mandatory or advisory, because it doesn't say.
I would think that it's advisory. I'm all for striking the section if you guys find that appropriate.
Yeah, if it's the section that talks about how paint will wrinkle if you paint on a moist board, it's kind of like, who needs that in this guidelines?
You can
Right.
Google that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, this was written pre-Google, I'm pretty sure. No, it was 2008, it's post-Google, I don't know why it's in here.
What's up, man? Life's busy, right?
Yeah.
We're on page 25.
So we're all in agreement to strike that section?
Appendix E?
And then subsection E, existing paint may be removed if done in a manner that will not damage the surface of the structure.
Well, so, and then the second sentence, such method of paint removal shall be reviewed in advance by the ARB if such facility is a historic building. I would strike historic building and put historic landmark.
Okay. So do keep it, or?
Keep it with the change of building to landmark, yeah, because you do want to make sure that they don't damage your historic landmark.
I think what happened was the museum across the way, if you look at it, they used the wrong tool to remove the paint. Next time you drive, you'll
Joe
walk
shaking
by,
his
you'll
head.
see how pitted it is because they used the wrong.
Or they use like a radial sander and it's spiralized it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry to go back to D. Was it D that keep that, but say that original siding or materials or be replaced in similar appearance?
Well, so, yeah, so maybe say original siding materials should be repaired and retained rather than removed or covered. And the next sentence would be if, so change shall to should in the first sentence. The second sentence, if replacement must be made and is approved by ARB, it must be with similar appearing materials.
Okay.
That's my recommendation. If you want to ban hardy plank siding specifically, which is a brand name, I would think you would want to explain why, or since it's talking about cement siding products in general, why those are prohibited.
Mr. Chairman, Emily, do you guys have any, I'm not sure why that was put in here.
I think that was the opinion of one of the prominent,
Yeah, I wouldn't put that because
People
I
who
think
wrote
that
this.
that lasts longer, so it would make sense to use something like
more
that.
durable
It gives
material,
the same
yeah.
appearance that would last a lot longer.
They're using it up here, I
they can
think.
strike.
All the buildings at the
Mm-hmm. I think so.
fairgrounds are all,
Fairgrounds, I think,
are all
yeah.
heavy plank.
Yeah.
So that should be taken off.
Emily, I saw you guys, we struck the fonts. And then demolition guidelines, Martin, I saw you, you wanted to replace subsection AA,
I'm sorry, what page?
page 26. Who's JK, by the way?
That's my secretary, Joy Kidd.
So your suggestion is to, and I think is consistent with what you said before, is replace that with just other reasonable conditions to preserve some examples, or?
Oh, okay, yeah. Other reasonable conditions, let's see, I've got it printed here, so let me see what's underneath that. Other reasonable conditions is designed to preserve the town's historic resources was what I suggested, and that could just go in as B.
Okay.
Because any reasonable conditions, any conditions are going to need to be reasonable, and then they're going to need to be designed to preserve the town's historic resources, because that's what we're doing here.
And that resolves the concern they had about building permits before demolition and all that stuff.
Yes.
Jumping to Appendix B. Is there any interest, Emily, do you think, in updating the sign examples for the ARB?
I'm happy to do so. I would suggest maybe at our next meeting when we discuss the draft, we can sit down and the board can kind of give me some ideas on which sign examples they like and which photos they would like to see in there or not see. I know some of these are no longer there. And same would apply for fencing material, updating. I'm happy to update any and all photos, but I think we should all talk and say which ones are a good example of what we want to see. I'll leave it at that. And then jumping ahead to Appendix D, I will work on updating that list. Marchant, I might reach out to you on some of the backstories and names and history that you have on some of the structures. And then we're striking all of E or parts of E.
I think the nodding consensus up here was to strike all of E, Appendix E.
Okay.
Source, Warrenton Historic District Guidelines. You plagiarized that, right?
I think we should add paddock fencing.
Paddock fencing? I mean, I think there's, you know, if we wanted to have like a URL to say, here's some ways to go find out about stuff. No E. On the appendix F.
Yeah, I guess we're striking that, it looks like. But you can't really show the picture being striked. I see the title was striked.
Emily, were you intending to strike the whole map from the design guidelines?
No, that was actually, Martin, I believe that was one of your strikes.
That is, simply because you don't want to have to update the guidelines every time the zoning map changes.
Yeah.
So we can put instead, somewhere where appropriate, a line that says, for the most up-to-date zoning map, refer to the town website or something along those lines.
You know, if you have a durable URL, you can just put that in the document, and then when you have this online, people can just click on it.
I'm not sure if it changed or not, but I think we had in the first part of the zoning ordinance for the historic district, it says the entire, the zoning, the boundary of the historic district is the jurisdictional boundary of the town, so until we shrink it, we probably don't need to.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason to have this would be as a reference to people to know what is the underlying zoning underneath the historic overlay district.
Okay.
The only other instance I see a necessity for a map is if we designate areas of time periods, and then maybe we go in and do something there and show, but again, it's the only time I see it necessary. Are there any other guideline questions or concerns for tonight? Seeing none, I will work on the draft, put it on Google Docs, and send it out to you guys for your additional review. And then we can move on to packet page 45. Excuse me, which is the bylaws and rules of procedure. So this is what we were supposed to discuss at our January work session that got canceled due to weather. What I did here is I took a draft set of bylaws that was on the company drive that had already been done up for the planning commission. I've tweaked it some so that it's applicable to the architectural review board. And I've kind of gone through, I've tried to streamline a lot of the information and simplify it. In our December meeting with Martin, we had discussed that the bylaws we had previously were a little detailed. Some of the information in them wasn't necessary. And so this is what I've kind of come up with. One area that I have highlighted in yellow on page 46, I think it can be a quick discussion item. There was some reference and talk previously of, did we want to allow a position on the board for a business owner in the town? I know some other jurisdictions do this because the business owners themselves have to keep their buildings looking nice, and they put a lot into the architectural style themselves, so I didn't know if this was of interest to the board.
Having a business owner?
I'm thinking it might be a good idea.
I think it would be a nice addition to also help with having some ownership on our business owners and have their voice represented as well as our residents, because you guys all live here, but there's so many people who are here every day and own businesses and want to have a say.
Yeah, they would have a different perspective and
Will there be a large enough selection of business owners if we're requiring everybody to be a resident of the town as
Would
well
this
as
be
the
the one
business owners?
exception?
That might really shrink down the pool for candidates in that.
So I was thinking in this that they would not be required to be a resident. It would be they have to own a business in the town, and if for any reason their business were to close or anything, they are no longer the owner, they would be removed from the board. They have to have an open, active, good standing business in the town.
When I was in Middleburg, Bill Teneur of Teneur Architects, they had the business in town, but he also served as the architect. We had provision for him to be able to sit on that.
maybe we could vote on that.
And it can be certainly something we think about. I can work with Martin on the logistics of it, and I can put it on the agenda for March 20th at our next meeting as well.
Yeah, because we'd have to amend Article 2, Number 1A as well, and then
Yes.
the language that you just suggested, Emily, in terms of what being a business owner in the town means would have to be addressed and tightened up. Ultimately, the council is going to have to approve those folks, and so this would need to go, I don't know if we want to make an ordinance amendment on this, or this is just, we ask the council to adopt these bylaws, and then by adopting these bylaws, the council says this is what we're looking for on our ARB. I don't know, which one do you want to do?
Because it would have to be like a physical build business, like
Versus.
town, versus like
a-
me, you
right.
know?
So, yeah, good question. Is it a home-based business, or does it have to have a brick-and-mortar location?
Like a brick and mortar.
Another, I
Yeah,
have
like half of the auto dealers we have, right? They were all virtual.
We no longer have any.
We no longer have any.
I have a question about it. Will the person that is taking this chair, how much it will be, and this is not the right word, but intrusive to, the residential type of architectural review, being that person not being a resident and have a voice and a say?
I think it could go, I think it would be okay, because I think it also goes both ways when businesses come in to see you guys and your residents, and how much say is there on what they do kind of business-wise day-to-day. So I think it goes both ways.
I do think that they are part of our community because they are a business owner, but they are not a part of our residential community. Just like people who visit the parks every
Right.
day,
I think the only residential applications, though, that we would be reviewing, generally, new home building, so new construction, if there's color changes or very specific material changes, but once the HOA already approves them, that's kind of already a half in the door there. They're not going to be looking at patios or decks, because we kind of already said here that they're not in public view, so that wouldn't be an issue. So you'd have very limited residential applications that would be under review anyway. I think a majority of it, you're going to have signage for businesses, you're going to have new construction for businesses, color changes, maybe material changes on commercial properties, things like that. But I do see what you're saying. How does anyone else feel about that?
I think we would want to vote on it here, and then I guess also see if the council is going to adopt that.
Okay.
One other
But
question I have, so,
we can wait until the next meeting, of course.
Emily, in Article 1.1 and then Article 2.1, one references 7 members of the board, and the other one references 5. The council, I guess we're back up to 7, but at one point they limited it to 5, and then they moved it back to 7. That was to have a quorum, I guess? Wasn't that what was happening for a while?
That was with Planning Commission, that was not with the ARB. We're still up to 7 members, but no fewer than 5, so we've met that.
Okay, so this one with Article 2.1, do we need to say just to be consistent, consists up to 7, but minimum of 5, just to be consistent with above?
Yeah.
Or just move this whole thing to Article 2 could just go to the ordinance.
So we do
Because
have.
it really is
Yeah.
controlling you all, and it's not something that necessarily needs to be in the bylaws.
So, yeah, Article 1 is already, I think, comes right out of the zoning ordinance. Also, with membership 2, the terms of office, they talk here kind of about rotating terms. Above talks about for 3, was the intent to keep it 3, do you remember, or are we trying to rotate it? Was that your recommendation?
Sorry, 3 where?
So, sorry, in Article 1.2, it talks about terms of office shall be 3 years. In Article 2.2,
It says 4 years.
says 2, 3, and 4 rotations. Were we recommending that we go to that rotation, or do we want to keep the 3?
So this was a piece of the previous draft that I
Okay.
found. So I'm okay if we go to 3 or 4, as long as we keep it consistent. It does get confusing for us as staff on who's 1, who's 2, who's 3, and having different terms assigned like that. So it would be more consistent and easier for us if we maybe rotate half the board, starts in this year with 4, and then, so that not everybody changes at the same time.
Can we do that on 3, you think, just kind of rotating? It's kind of where we're at right now, aren't we all kind of different?
Yeah,
I think we're all in different cycles.
sort of. The council liaisons cycled with the election. Planning commission is cycled with the planning commission liaison's term on that board. And then the other 3 should probably be kind of consistent. Or
I think we're all
5.
different right now, so I
Four.
think we're already on different cycles.
That should be consistent.
Okay.
That should be in the ordinance.
Okay.
Are there any other topics or areas in here that anyone feels need to be changed? Any additions? I did put a mark with the public hearing if this section was needed. Martin, I can talk to you about that further,
Yeah, see that.
but
For membership, since there are only 5 members, do we, how do people feel about only one household member can be on the board? Do you feel like if you have a husband-wife team up here, would that give one household too much authority? And
I think so.
so, you may want to restrict that within the membership.
okay.
That's ultimately going to be the council's decision, though.
Yeah, I kind of figured that, but I didn't know if that needed to be
brought up.
mentioned or.
So I guess,
And like you said, a lot of this stuff could be pulled out and put into the ordinance that the council members use to make
Right.
their decision.
so I guess back to that point, Mr. Chairman, are we agreeable to have the 7 members on the 3-year cycles? Should we just go ahead and give that direction now, or? Well, you're saying it's going to be put in the zoning ordinance, so
Is it
maybe
up
we don't.
to 7?
I think the first part says up to 7, no fewer than 5, and then the 3-year rotation versus the cycling. But your recommendation is that decision should be put in the ordinance, that's what we're thinking? Okay.
But I do think it would be easier if it's just 3,
3 years?
because then you can just look at when they started. You wouldn't have to say, oh, were they 2, were they 3?
A 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, which slot do they hold?
And when I think the public hearing, I noticed that I've encountered that before where some language talks about we hold a meeting, other language says we hold a hearing, so maybe that's just an inconsistency between the,
And I was trying to think of situations that the Architectural Review Board would ever have a public hearing. And I couldn't, based on our ordinance, I couldn't come up with any.
I want to say one point I ran into the state code. The state code talks about the local ARB having hearings, but that, it seemed to have a different definition. I know Loudoun County, they have hearings, they go out, they put the signs out, but that seems to be at the election of the jurisdiction, not a,
It is. Town of Culpeper requires all of their elected and appointed bodies to have a public comment period,
okay.
but that's also completely optional at the local option. And in terms of, making a public hearing, you could add that. You could have public comment on every application if you wanted to. But, then you have to follow the rules for public hearings in general, allow everybody to speak for the same period of time and allow for, can't kick people out just because they don't want to be civil. So, you run into some issues with that.
But we already had the public comment in the agenda, right? So I think we're
Yeah.
covered, okay.
So I'll plan to strike this section, Article 10.
I can send you some examples from other historic, ARB bylaws if you like.
Okay, that would be great, thank you. unless there's any other comments on the bylaws, I will work with Martin on a couple of the notes I have here for how to approach certain aspects of it. The business member added, I'll put that on the agenda for March 20th, so give it some thought if you have any questions of how it would affect applications, or if there's certain kind of requirements that you want to see added, please call me, email me, we can talk about it, and I can put together a memo for that, and we'll vote on March 20th
On the bylaws, okay.
on adding the business member, and then we'll look at the draft. You guys will also receive a Google Doc version of the draft. You can make additional changes, we'll discuss them, and then hopefully we'll plan to do a vote on them April. And it gives us a whole month to kind of clean them up and think about it. And before or after the sign presentation by Bond, Chairman, if you are all open to it, can we add an agenda item to vote in a vice chairman in case you were absent at a meeting? We would have somebody to lead it.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I be excused? I don't think you need my services after this point.
I think that is a good choice. You may be excused.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming
Thanks,
tonight,
Martin.
Martin.
pleasure.
If you want to change the agenda, I'm assuming we got to pose that, put that up
Yes.
for a vote. Quick discussion before we vote. Anybody have any comments on whether we change the agenda? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll add selection process for a vice chair. Okay, we're up for vice chair. Anybody want to volunteer? Anybody want to elect another person to do it?
I'd like to elect Marchant.
Nominate?
Well, he said elect, so.
Sure, I'll accept the nomination.
Okay.
You said you accept?
I'll accept the nomination.
Oh.
Nomination. So we'll put it up for a vote then, if everybody's happy with,
Any other
anybody else
folks'
want to?
interest?
Oh, I'll compete against you. I don't want to be vice chair. Okay, so we'll put it up for a vote. I guess we can make this a verbal vote, right? Okay, all in favors that Marchant be vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Marchant, you are now vice.
Thank you. I'll grow my beard out and
Congratulations.
get the gray hair. Yeah.
This is coming off this weekend.
I'll grow mine out. We'll be-
I just had to irritate my wife for a month or two,
Do you want to pass this?
just to show that I'm an individual.
I could probably, well,
Fine, while Emily's sitting up, were you able to, the budget discussions, how did we get monies in there for this?
yes,
Or that
I-
part of your presentation,
I've
sorry?
brought it up multiple times. It's still ongoing, so Roberto gave us a budget meeting, but it wasn't a planning meeting, it was more of like a presentation of the current budget. So he's supposed to be scheduling actual planning meetings for the budget, but I've definitely brought it up and explained that, that we're hoping we can have the money appropriated. The one concern I had, which I'm not gonna let that, get in our way, is just that they've mentioned a sidewalk project with VDOT that is going to be costly in our next budget cycle. But I'm still hoping with this presentation and with the signs that we can still get enough money to do at least the small ones this term. So that's my goal.
And if I may add to that, so I've been working on the draft CIP for the Planning Commission to look at and give their approval and blessing on at our next Planning Commission meeting. In there, I've included the Gateway Sign Program. So I spoke with Fraser and Associates on the sign plan and the program they did out in Leesburg. They gave me a lot of different ideas on the cost for the design phase, construction and engineering phases, so I've broken that up in our CIP so that hopefully we could ask for monies to do the design plan and put up 2 post and panel signs next year, so July to June of 2020. And then we would hopefully be able to budget for the following year 1 monument sign, and then the year after that, our second one, and be done within the next 3 years with the entire sign program. So that's currently how I have it broken up. The design phase itself is 12 to 15,000. Each post and panel sign runs up to 8,000, depending on the ornamental features of the post. The monument signs themselves run upwards of 25,000 each, and that doesn't necessarily include any VDOT permitting or any land acquisition that you would have to go through. So I did budget for 35,000 on each of those. So they are costly, but hopefully we can at least start working on the design phase of it. Bond has prepared. Bond has prepared a presentation for us that I will let you lead and go through. No, I will click through it for you if I can get it started 1 second.
F11, I think. Daughter just texted me if she could use a blender.
Yes, go for it.
As long as she uses her finger
No
to
move.
pack the stuff in.
Exactly. We'll see how that goes.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. So this, we can edit, of course, but I was just trying to show the general area of where we're gonna put the signs. This is not exact, so if we're moving the larger gateway ones, we'll talk about that later, but the main ones we're focusing on are the ones on Jefferson Street. You can go to the next slide. So what I'm hoping to do, so if you remember, Robert Day did a great presentation when he was on the ARB of all different sign shapes and colors and all of that. So I kind of broke it down, and what my hope is for tonight to help bring down that design cost is if we can kind of solidify what we're hoping for. So these are the post signs, which we'll go through it all first, and then what I'm hoping we can do is we could all just vote on what your individual favorite shape is, what your favorite color would be, what your favorite post option is, and then maybe we can bring it all together and kind of narrow down, okay, this is what we're looking for, and then we could kind of compare with different companies even to see what the costs would be for them.
This would be based, what you're looking for is personal preference?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're like as we're going through these, if you see one that you like, you could make a note on your paper for what the shape is, but we'll go back through it also. So this is shape 1. So the picture in the corner, just ignore, that's more of like a gateway style. We're just looking at the shape of the sign, not the actual sign itself, okay? You can go to the next one. So this one has like a little bit more of like a rounded shape.
Looks English style.
This one's very similar to what we already have in town, like at the museum, the shape at the top. That's another style. And now we can go forward to the colors. So having it have like a white or a cream background, which is similar to what we have at the museum. But that doesn't show very good on there, but it's like a dark green, like a Hanover green. Hanover,
Yeah, I think forest green,
yeah.
which I would just like to add a small editorial. That is the color we like always use for everything right now. If it's not our black and white seal, we steer towards that one.
Like a dark red or copper red or burgundy. And then these are the different post options, like a plain metal one. This is a decorative post. That's the hanging.
This would be similar to the Copper Cricket one that's out front.
Another point that Emily brought up when we met is this is kind of neat because it's two-sided, whereas the others you would only have one. So on this one you could do, you know, thank you for visiting. So that's kind of neat. And then that's the double post style. I actually found all of those on a website. Now we'd have to figure out the scale of them, but they were all in that price range, so, for the actual posts themselves. So, just a thought. So do we want to go back and make our individual choices on like the shapes? And if you have another recommendation, you could draw it in too.
Just a quick question, was the idea to eventually replace the museum and the
No,
museum sign? We'll just always keep that, that'll just kind of be that
Oh, that-
branding for the.
that could be something, but this is just for the
this is
two
just for the
welcome
gate- Oh, just for the
signs.
gateways, okay.
So these are the two post signs that will be the smaller signs as you're driving in on either side of Jefferson Street. Yeah.
Marshawn, I also see what you're saying about replacing the one at the museum. I would say if we come up with a cost-effective option for the two post and panel, and it's all the same to get a third one made that fits within the posts that already exist at the museum, it could be an easy addition. Same with the sign above our door right now. We have one up there that looks kind of like this style, I think. The only thing we've noticed is, and you can kind of see it when you go out tonight, the grooves of the background catch a lot of dirt, so the creamy color that was chosen just looks very dirty and worn. So that's something to keep in mind with your colors.
Is it, are we thinking about using the town seal on the signs or using the branding from the museum?
We're gonna do
To
that
be
too.
determined at the end of the presentation.
Sorry, I didn't know myself. But the idea, my last question, so the idea would be eventually, like, just to phase it, that we'll do our wayfinding on the outside, and then we'll eventually begin to replace all the other ones, okay?
Yes.
Thanks.
And also, a concern with the background colors is, I think someone from VDOT told me, or one of the sign manufacturers told me that on the smaller signs, which is probably what we're having at these 2 points, a lighter background is best just because of the pop of the signage itself, the lettering. Because as you know, on the large overhead signs, you have a dark background and white lettering, but on the speed signs, you have white with the black lettering.
It
And
could
that was the
probably go
thing.
both ways. When I talked to Sandy Hanger at Fraser, she said that all of theirs they print on reflective material. So if you think of the ones that say "Welcome to Loudoun County," they have a maroon and a dark green background with gold lettering on it, but you still see it because the way your headlights hit or the sunlight, it has a reflective look to it. So I think you could go about any way now due to technology.
Can you go through the shapes real quick again?
You can do it like the eye doctor. One or two. Two or three.
The shapes vary to me depending on what pole is being used, on which one I'd choose.
Do you want to pick poles first? Does that make more sense?
I already picked.
You can go to
How about
color.
you guys?
My selection's going to go hand in hand with the pole. Like I
Okay.
said, if a different pole gets chosen, I would actually probably choose a different shape
Okay,
than what I'm actually choosing to begin with.
let's start with poles then. So one is your basic,
That was easy.
2, 3.
What was
think
2 again?
4 I think will be a little costly.
I think we're going for like the, yeah, I think I like 2 and 3, I think, actually.
But the tree is multi-use, right? You
Yes.
can hang more in different occasions.
So hypothetically, if 3 is chosen as the board's top decision, I will need to contact VDOT and figure out if we put this sign in where we want it on Jefferson Street, how they feel about this bottom part. They might not like it for the sake that how much does it overhang into the right of way? Pedestrians, bicyclists, whoever's on the sidewalk, if they're going to be smacking it, they might not like that idea. So it all depends on the location and if VDOT would let us do this one. So if that's option
But we
one.
can still choose it.
Yeah, you can still choose it. I will go talk to them and hope and plan for the best, but let's have a backup option if this is number 1.
You just want to take a straw vote on post?
Yes.
Yeah, straw vote would be good.
Anybody for, you want me to run the vote for you?
Yeah,
Anybody for number 1?
no.
Number 2? Okay, 4? Number 3? Okay, so number 2. Post, number 2. Color of the post. Keep in mind our streetlights right now are Hanover green color. They do fade, but we're also putting in the CIP, hopefully having those repainted at some point. But just know that the green fades a little bit more than black. Depending on where it goes on Jefferson Street by the bridge, all of those light poles are black, so keep that in mind as well. So,
So we just want to make a command decision on,
black or green?
yeah,
Should we vote?
Black?
I'm okay with black.
black. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we should probably eventually all go to black. I mean, no?
I
You like
love
the
the
Hanover?
green.
Okay.
Well, let's vote for it. Who wants
Okay.
black?
I'm gonna lose, I know
For
it.
these,
Just
I
don't
would
look.
say
On the
black.
gateway signs?
Yeah, on the gate,
Yeah.
on these 2 gateway signs, I'd say black.
Gateway signs. I'm saying keep the green on the light poles.
Okay,
Okay, so
That's okay.
signs, we said black post.
okay.
Okay, look, we're moving right along, guys. Shape of the sign. Option 1. Option 2.
Oh, we're voting, sorry.
Option 3.
I'm back on option 2. That would probably look
Sorry,
better
we're
on
on option 3. You
Oh.
raised your hand.
the... No go backs, no go backs.
Option 1. Option 2. Option 3. Option 4.
I hate losing.
I will
Okay,
change my
can
mind.
I ask-
I will change my mind and go back to 3.
May I make one recommendation, just from what I've seen? If you think about our park signs that we currently have, they have the same top as this here, where they come up, and it has more of that angle.
Scallop.
So,
And it's our history.
yes. So what I would say is unless we're wanting them to all be mixed matched, I think we should maybe consider going with this line here because it matches the park sign, the museum sign, and then the second museum sign that's actually on double post.
Okay, I changed my vote.
Okay.
Well, the only reason I wouldn't pick this one is because with the pole selection we have, you got that pole that's going to totally obscure that,
Element?
that crescent in the very center.
Unless we do, well, we'll see what colors voted, right? Because
I think
if it's cream with a black pole behind it, you'll still see it.
yes, and the other thing you can do is you can mount the panel a little higher on the post, and therefore you wouldn't see the top of the post. So you could tweak it depending, you maybe wouldn't need as tall of a post with the ornamental feature on the top, you just have the ornamental base.
Or if you do, you just have enough so that it's kind of like
Almost like the top of the flag.
the
like-
finial,
Yeah.
yeah, the finials that we have. I think we do have a finial on one of our signs, don't we?
Yes.
Is it an easy way to kind of cut that image and drop it into the pole slide?
Yes. Give me a moment.
You might want to use the actual picture of the sign because I like built this shape of the sign with like multiple shapes. You know what I mean? So it's like a rectangle and then it's like all different shapes.
Oh, you customize it? Cool.
Yeah.
Give me just a second.
As a suggestion, it's not that, it's difficult, don't worry about it. I guess what you're saying, that on that pole, there's like a panel that has the finial on top of the other one, and
Yeah,
then mount to it.
If we plant it high, that sign high enough on that pole, so
Mhm.
that pole acts as like a finial, that would probably be appropriate.
Gotcha.
It doesn't matter, there's a 3-2 vote anyway, so
Oh,
you guys
no,
win
no,
anyways.
I got it. Just
Oh, wow.
imagine with me.
Exactly.
It's gonna be a little smaller, but
Yeah,
you get the idea.
good
Yeah, well,
job.
Yeah, I didn't think you could take it up a little higher.
I like
Cover
it
the
like,
whole thing.
Hey,
I like where you
Like-
can
like
see the
there,
top.
yeah. Right there is good.
Yeah.
That looks nice.
That would be appropriate for me to vote yes.
sorry, I told my daughter, yes, she could use the blender. Okay, I will be safe. Yeah.
Okay, so we like this option, right?
Yes.
Okay, moving right along. What color do you guys want it? I'll color it too.
Color of the sign or color of the post?
The background of the sign, let's start there. So white or cream,
I like cream.
2,
I like cream.
3,
Cream's fine.
4,
Yeah.
5.
I-
Excellent.
To complicate it though, it would be neat to have some type of runner along the.
Border.
The border along the edge of a
Yeah,
dark,
thick border.
whatever the font color is or the
I agree.
lettering color is. And then, unless we
So-
use multiple colors, right, for the details.
It's not gonna show it very well, but there's your white sign.
I think the dark green font would be pretty with like gold accent
Like a border.
somewhere.
So I would do green. Similar to the museum sign now, I think there is a thick green border around it. There's green font, so I would just do it all to kind of match.
Mhm.
And then, if appropriate, if there's a second color that would look good, like if we put established 1799 or anything, then have a secondary font of gold, and like a dark gold.
Mhm.
Yeah, more of a bronze gold.
Yeah. Okay. How about we go to the message? Thoughts? Currently on the sign at the park and the sign at the museum, we have a changeable message. What we put there is like, welcome to the town of Haymarket. We put our events there. We do put our tagline on that one. So we have that in 2 locations already. On the post and plaque, Fraser, they recommended keep it as simple. It should just really be welcome to town of Haymarket. Leave it at that. She said, you're not putting all your information on here. It's not intended for a slogan. It's for letting people, drivers, pedestrians know where they are and that they've crossed over into your town, or leaving if you put a second message. But they really recommended keeping the text as simple as possible with the fewest words.
I like the established 1799.
I do too.
I always look, you know,
Let me
that is the beauty of the United States. Like, you go and you want to find out when it was established.
Let me pull up a couple of their examples.
I'm impartial to the old branding,
Me too.
but I like
Are you
the,
not?
I am
Oh, yeah.
impartial to the old branding, but I like the new,
What if we did like a
circle, yeah.
combination,
Logo.
yeah, so.
something like that,
Where you,
or
Somewhere you need a welcome to, or are we just gonna say Haymarket?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't See, I don't know what the size of the sign is to see if it
Or
all
which way it's
fits.
facing.
Yeah, so my initial
If it's
reaction.
short, Haymarket would be fine.
Hold on, let me
But-
get back to it.
I think with the sign type that we just picked, I think the round circle, to your point, entering, or welcome to, town of Haymarket established, blah, 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 and then find other ways to use the old branding.
And you can kind of like follow the seal with the welcome to, and then Haymarket could be straight across on the bottom, so.
That's kinda what
up
you're
top,
looking at.
down.
It's also considering, which way it's facing, so we could say instead of welcome to, there's also your thanks for visiting kind of thing as well.
The only thing is we'd have to have another sign on the back of the pole if we were gonna do
And
that.
that's not necessarily like a
Yeah.
guaranteed, yeah. That's fair. I guess we go back to that VDOT thing, whether or not, if it's hanging or not.
I'm trying to find other examples. So this one,
Hey, go Hokies.
here they put just town of, and then they have established 1798 in an oval like this. If we have a white background, green lettering here, this could be, some gold and green features in this. It would be very simple. If you saw the slide before that I had up there, Leesburg, they just put Leesburg in their script lettering, and then they put in the oval just the year that they were established. I don't think we want to start complicating it by putting the seal on there. I think just as simple as possible. We could probably even leave off welcome to and save that for our gateway monument sign.
Oh, okay, so we're doing it, okay. Where were the gateway monument signs, where were those? Those would replace the two that we have.
Those, we were trying to get as far to the boundaries of the town, so somewhere like QBE property, somewhere in that location, it might have to come back up to the park depending on easements and land, so that would replace that one. And then we're hoping to get one as close to the intersection down here at Sheets as we could.
So this is just the
This is just
gateway. We're calling these the,
Post
post and
signs.
panel.
Post sign,
So
okay,
think
sorry.
of it just like this one where the person's standing.
okay.
It's oriented to show vehicular traffic as they come in on Jefferson Street. That's where those two would go. And you can do different messages. I mean, these two are the same thing, different sizes. But on the larger one, when the time comes that we design that one, it could say, welcome to Town of Haymarket. But on the smaller ones, we could do the same thing or just leave it Town of Haymarket.
I like that town of, just simple town of Haymarket, and with the established with the gold accents like we were talking about. I think that'd be really nice.
So just use the branding that we have right now.
Or
That
put like
scripted.
historic town of Haymarket, or is that too much?
Yeah, can you pull up the,
You could, a thought, you could put historic Haymarket
I think
and
that's-
leave town of off.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
off the circle or off the
So, like,
text?
Here, the text, so town of would say historic, right there in small print, and then you'd have Haymarket in your script print below it.
Okay,
It would say historic Haymarket.
that's what we used
And
to
then
have.
still put the
Remember that?
established.
That's what we used to, in the entrances, they were all taken down, but it was basically the replicate of what the town museum was, but it had the two posts and it had welcome to Haymarket. One was actually in front of QBE, but it was, and one was down there, but they both got hit by cars, and one's in Fred's garage, and
Yeah.
so,
You could see the-
but yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah. I guess the question would be just that script, we've had to be sensitive to the sign and the size, because that script, I guess that big at 25 miles an, 45 miles an hour. Sure, you can see it.
And that's where we would
Oh,
get
there you
some
go, okay.
help with designing the sign. They would come in and help us with the size of the script and things like that.
So you're saying,
So this one still exists. So one thing to point out on this one, and I'll just keep it brief because you guys chose cream. We just need to have in our minds that if a cream is chosen, we need to make sure they're kept up and cleaned, and we just have to figure out how we're going to clean them. and set aside, some money for that, because we want to take care of them so they last, but it will show a little bit of dirt.
You're talking about up front, take this out and just say historic Haymarket is what you're saying?
Yes, and then you'd have your little oval established 1799.
And I think we're going to lean towards doing a metal sign that's reflective versus this type for the post signs. Do you all agree on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't do this,
Yeah.
that style.
And
that's etched.
that would address your upkeep problem as well.
And lower the cost, I'm sure.
We're talking about like metal with vinyl lettering.
I'll have to see what they recommend product-wise, what'll stand up the best. I know some of them, they're kind of like a thicker plaque. I don't know what material they use though, but it's almost, it
Probably
feels like
plastic
hardy
or some
plank,
sort,
but I
yeah.
don't know what they printed on. Okay, so our message is gonna be
Historic Haymarket.
Haymarket. Historic small letters,
Mm-hmm.
Haymarket script. Established 1799, an oval at the bottom with gold, green, and/or black detailing, depending on how many colors are needed to make it stand out.
And then an outline or no?
Mm-hmm.
An
A
outline or
border,
something? Border.
a
And the
dark
color.
green border to match the dark green font.
So the outermost border will be green. To match the font. The oval border may be the gold color.
If you go
Yeah.
back to the little PowerPoint, I like how the border in the one sign, like it still had a cream edge and then it had, if I'm remembering correctly, was it cream and then the green border was inside of it.
Yeah.
I think it like, I think it
Which-
popped a little more. Keep going up. That one. If you click on that one. Or is it the whole border? I can't tell.
It almost looks like they have, and it could be the angle they took it, but it looks like there's a gray.
Oh,
Here.
okay.
So one thing you could do, we can, of course, I think we should also take some of the design expertise
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
The outer border, we can do green, and then that inner border could be gold. Or black, and then the thin green. We can kind of see.
I really like that.
Okay. So
With another color combination would be fine, but I think it looks really pretty.
It works out with the shape really well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sounds like we got it all figured out.
I've been thinking for the lettering of the historic Haymarket, I still like the word town,
Okay.
historic town.
Historic town of Haymarket.
You don't have to go off historic town, Haymarket, established.
Okay.
I like town too. That
I mean, there is a lot of saying, in between what differentiates a city from a town.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a town, or, I mean, when I go to Pennsylvania, the people are very proud when they say township of,
Right.
and they make a point out of it.
Parish down in Louisiana.
Okay.
yeah.
So small lettering would be historic town of?
I mean, we could do it like this one here, though.
Could we do like
Historic
historic
town
town
of.
and then of like small, like historic town on the same line, then of, and then Haymarket big?
Yeah.
Like
Go back to the
of,
museum sign.
Maybe in cursive, historic town, bold.
So yeah, just say, take the off and just say historic town of Haymarket right there. Like that?
Fits.
That too.
I think she was saying like you would have it like vertically going down, saying historic town of on like one end, saying of in the middle, and then Haymarket.
Like historic town, maybe like bold,
Offset.
of in cursive, and then historic, and, I'm sorry, Haymarket in that font, and then established in an oval underneath.
We've moved on pretty far from keeping it simple.
You can take the off. The off doesn't do much. You know, historic
Why
town,
don't I-
Haymarket, established.
design?
I like the
Yeah, why don't I talk to the design people and get them to just do up a
Yeah.
couple iterations? Because they might come back with a wildly different recommendation based on what they've done before. So if we agree on this starting point, this is what I'll start with. And then we will go from there. How does that sound?
Good.
Okie dokie. That's all I had.
Okay. I think that comes to the end of our agenda.
You like this back or no?
No.
Okay, just double check.
Thank
that.
you.
Just a
This was-
tool.
This was useful.
I say it's time for adjournment. Anybody have a motion for me? Okay, I'll accept Marchand's motion.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
I'll second it.
Okay.